What's happening, everybody? Welcome back to another Fall Obsession podcast episode. My name is Sam Thrash, and I am your show host over here at Fall Obsession. Appreciate you guys tuning in to another Monday morning podcast. This week, we are on here with our Western Regional Staff Coordinator here at Fall Obsession, Tim Berges. He's a Colorado resident, and every year, Tim does a lot of legwork around this time of year when Colorado comes out with their 2024 or whatever the current year is in their big game draw application rules and regs and all that stuff. So Tim is very familiar and very well versed in what CPW has going on out there. He's our resident expert for sure. And this time every year he puts together an ultimate educational piece, a guide, if you will, on our website, fallobsession.com. That you guys can use as a tool and a resource if you're trying to plan a hunt in Colorado for every big game species that there is. He has it laid out in there. And then him and I always sit down this time of year and do a podcast about some of the changes that Colorado is seeing this year. And out of all of the the big game application podcasts that we've done for a few years in a row now, this is probably the most interesting one. This is probably my favorite one, just given some of the more controversial topics that are circulating Colorado right now with the wolves, the mountain lions, and some of the stuff going on up there. So we get into all that in this podcast, and I hope you guys stick with us and tune in and enjoy that. Before we get into the episode, though, I want to hit a couple things. The first one being Hoot Camo. I'm rocking a Hoot Camo t-shirt if you're watching the podcast video. But the guys down here at Hoot, they are outstanding to work with. They are a great brand, a great company, and they make great camo. And I'm not just saying that. I've worn this stuff this year in Texas, in Colorado, 2023, last year I guess it is now, Texas, Colorado, plains, hardwoods, grasses, you name it. I've hunted in it this past year, the snow. Hunted in the snow in Hoot Camo, and it actually did really, really well. But it's great gear. It's a great quality product, and the best part about it is the price point. Hoot is dedicated to building a brand that quality-wise is on par with the industry leaders, but is at a price point that's more realistic for blue-collar outdoorsmen such as yourselves and I. So if you're interested in checking out what Hoot's got going on, head on over to their website, hootcamo.com. And if you want to place an order, whether it's for a full set of gear or maybe you just want to pick up some everyday wear, they got hats, they got hoodies, they got, just everyday apparel. Place an order. Fall Obsession 15 is the code that you guys can use that will save you some money at checkout. So Hoot Camo, go check them out. Another podcast partner that we have over here at Fall Obsession is Ridge Rock Hunt Company. Derek and Lacey over there in Mississippi, they book hunts with vetted outfitters across the country, and they have a large network of vetted and trusted outfitters that Derek wouldn't have in his network if he didn't want to hunt with them himself. So if you are interested in booking that next hunt, maybe after listening to this podcast, you want to book a Colorado hunt, give Derek a call if you're looking to do it with an outfitter, and he'll get you set up with somebody that works for you depending on what your needs are. Ridge Rock Hunt Company. Derek Eves is the man over there. Go check them out. The Outdoor Call Radio app is also a podcast partner. Outdoors Dan from Respect the Game TV, he created an app for hunters and outdoorsmen that you can download on any device where you can stream hunting shows and podcasts on a loop every single day. You will catch Fall Obsession podcast playing on that loop on Mondays, the same day as our new publications, as well as tons of other hunting shows and podcasts that we all know and love. So go download the Outdoor Call Radio app today. It is free, and start streaming immediately. Also, go follow Outdoors Dan on social media. He does a couple of different live broadcasts at local Midwest radio stations every week, and he shares those live broadcasts on his Facebook Live if you are not local to those stations, so you can catch those on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So the Outdoor Call Radio app, go download it, go check out Outdoors Dan, and follow him on social media. Last but not least, we always appreciate your support over here at Fall Obsession. We are trying our best to run this small-time hunting brand and hunting and outdoor media production company. And we're doing our best to bring you guys high-quality content for the blue-collar hunter and outdoorsman. That's our goal. And always appreciate your support. So whatever podcast platform you're listening on, be sure that you hit that follow and subscribe button. Turn your notifications on if you can. Be sure you follow Fall Obsession on social media, and go to our website, fallobsession.com, and check out all of the great content that we have flowing through our custom website. And pick you up a hat, a shirt, give us some support if you're so inclined from that website. So fallobsession.com, that's where you guys can go to find everything. And even if you have your own hunting and outdoor brand and you're interested in maybe promoting on this podcast during this sponsor segment, we'd love to hear from you. You can go to fallobsession.com/podcast and fill out a form on that page. That'll put you into contact with our production team, and we can discuss what that might look like if you're interested. So thank you guys for supporting Fall Obsession. All right, that's it from me. We are kicking off our episode with Tim, talking about some Colorado hunting coming up in 2024. You guys are listening to another Fall Obsession podcast.
Oh, you got her, dude. She's down.
Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome back to another Fall Obsession Podcast episode. I'm Sam. I'm your show host over here. Thanks for tuning in. I am on here with our Fall Obsession Western Regional Coordinator, Mr. Tim Berges. Welcome back to the podcast, man.
Thanks, Sam. Good to be back.
Yeah, man. You're no stranger to the podcast. I'd have to look it up probably to go through all the numbers and all the episodes that you've been on. You've been joining us since the infant phases of this show, but most recently, the podcast episodes you were on was 166, 167, and 170. Kind of a 166 and 167 were recorded in Colorado Deer Camp last year. You, me, and Mike Teepee. And then we met up later to recap your awesome muley and kind of the cherry on top for the rest of the hunt with 170. So I bring that up because if our listeners want to go back and listen to that awesome story, the experience we had hunting together last year, those are some good episodes to hit up in that order for sure. That way you get the whole story and everything. But today we are hopping on here to talk a little bit about Colorado, some tags, some draw applications. I know this time of year for the past few years now, I know you've been putting together an article for us on fallobsession.com as far as how to get a big game tag in Colorado. That's the title, I think, of the article, and just kind of a guide for anybody that might be looking for anything in particular when it comes to putting in for Colorado points. Because if you've done it before, as I'm sure you'll mention here, it's not the most simplified process by any means. So at least for a non-resident, I'm talking as a Texas guy down here.
It's definitely like one of those things you do it once and you start to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because the screens don't but the first time it's so confusing. And I think that's the big scare everybody has is one, like they're like, well, I'm just throwing money at the future, which is actually, you have to think of it as an investment. I'll get into that in a minute. But, the other part of it is it's like so many guys like, I don't know how to do this and I'm just scared to take the first step.
Yeah.
And so they delay their, dream hunt by every year you wait, it's another year. And realistically at the point now, where like every 5 years you wait, it's probably really like 6 or 7 years with point creep and increase in tag costs and everything.
Yeah.
Now that a non-resident elk tag here is over 800. If you get into like Wyoming special draw, I think I want to say now it's like $1,900 or something insane. Which that's the quickest way to get like a good Western elk permit is that. But you're at $2,000 just in license and permit. Like you're in deep just to start the show.
Yeah. No, it's changing for sure, and I know we're gonna get into some of that and everything. I know it kind of going off of what you just said, like even for a non-resident, you mentioned, you kind of start figuring it out, after you do it a time or two. And last year was my first year ever putting in for Colorado, as you know, and fortunate enough to get up there and hunt with a muley archery tag. But even with that, and then us having done this now for several years in a row, both through your article and then through this podcast every year, even I'm getting a little bit more familiar with it. Because I remember the first time that we recorded a podcast about this stuff, man, I'll be honest with you, it was like you were speaking Greek. Like, I did not know what was going on.
You and Nick were taking notes and like I was just like, guys, I'll just tell you after. Don't even try to keep up. We'll just tell me when you want to start spending money, and I'll walk you through it at that point. Like, just tell me when you're ready to spend the money, and we'll make it happen.
Yeah,
that's the big thing. Like I said, is you gotta start the investment early. Like, kind of on that note, basically to put in for an animal this year, it's I gotta check the notes. $121 and change.
Yeah.
And so then every additional species is $10 more. But if you think about it, like 5 to 7 points, if you're going to do archery, especially for like elk or deer, put you into a whole different class of like at where you're going to be able to go, in that you're probably going to have a third to half of the hunting pressure you would have doing over the counter, which is huge to start with when you deal with 100 dudes instead of 1,000 dudes or 500 dudes. And the other thing about that is then you're in these places with similar quality of animals and numbers with half the people or less. So that's really where even just a 5-year plan can make a huge difference in your success rate.
Yeah, for sure. So I mentioned it briefly. I'll give it a proper plug here. Every year, in addition to us doing this podcast about the Colorado annual draw applications, they put out their book and everything like that. You put together that article. You put together a written piece, a written guide. And our listeners, if they're interested in going and checking that out, they can find it at fallobsession.com in our educational articles section. It's been published. It's live for the 2024 version, and we'll be sure that we put a link in the description on this podcast episode on all platforms. That way you guys can get to it easily. But that's going to walk you guys through whatever species you're going. Tim has spelled it out on, all sorts of different ways that you can get a tag. You have 6 options or 11 options or 3 options, whatever it is, to get this tag, and here's what they all are. And he walks you through that. He talks about cost. It's you've made it as easy as possible for people to be able to look at it and be like, okay, this is what I need to do. This is what I can expect to spend, etc. So go check out the written guide if you are serious about anything in particular. But we want to dive into it today as far as the podcast and for the educational value of this show. And I got my book in the mail too down here in Texas, so it made it all the way south. But what are the big changes? What's going on? And I know that's a broad question, but there's obviously been a lot of discussion lately around Colorado. And we can talk about some of the more controversial topics maybe later on just a little bit. But as far as what 2024 saw, what kind of changes were big?
Yeah, and I'll do a little background on them so it makes a little sense as to why. But the biggest changes are in like Northwest Colorado, which from like me being crazy. That's where I like forever I hunted there. So it's like units 3, 11, 301, 211, 220, or 23, 24, 12, 231, 131, 13, 441, 4, 5, 214, and 14. Basically, if you're familiar, it's like north of Glenwood Springs to the border, and then like west of Steamboat, almost to the border. So it's a bunch of the like super high population for elk units. The top, in my opinion, the top pronghorn units. For deer, they're good, but they're not like that great a trophy. There's pretty good numbers, but they're not like outstanding deer units, but they're still solid. But for elk and pronghorn, they're some of the best units. Maybe not in overall like trophy quality, but definitely in realistic opportunity and tag success, even with insane hunter numbers. I forget if it was 22 or 21 I was looking at the other day. There were 1,800 over-the-counter rifle hunters in elk season 2.
Whoa.
1,800 dudes in Unit 3 and 1,500 in Unit 301, which is half the size of 3.
Holy crap.
And like that's where like there's a ton of dudes up there, and like doesn't mean they hunted their whole season there. They did. It just reports that they did at least one day there on that thing.
Wow.
But like they are like some of the most popular units, and for great reason. They are not very high altitude, like the high end's like 8,000 feet. Beautiful sage flats, awesome landscape. You can do a lot of work with your binoculars. I love hunting there personally. I didn't go last year, but for several years in the previous, and then even when I was younger, that's like was my primary elk spot. So it's an area that I love and would even still recommend going to. It's just a lot different this year in that, like for pronghorn, we'll start there because this is probably the biggest, like hardest change of all of it. There's no doe hunting in like any of those units this year. And then they've reduced the tag numbers by like 70 to 80% for bucks.
Oh, wow.
And so like insane difference. And the reason is the main one, which everyone's going to say it's not, but the real main one is in 2022 and 2023, they had back-to-back like all-time terrible winters. I know in 2022, they had like snowfalls, like where it was like multiple feet of snow on the ground for weeks at a time.
Wow. During
the winter. High temperatures in the like -10 range for like weeks at a time. So just like absolute insane calf mortality. Most of the like yearlings and then like new babies died. I know in one of the herds they reported like 80% first year animals dead.
Wow.
Which is insane. Pair that with a little bit of not the wolf introduction that's been so controversial, but it's right next to Wyoming. And so there's been wolves coming over. I've personally seen them in 3 and 301 back in January of 2022. So I can vouch as a human, they've been there. It's not like they're not there in thousands or anything like that, but they are coming through and causing some issues. And so that plus those super bad winters, it did also kind of wipe out the bear numbers is the other weird change for the area. There's never really been that many. So it used to be just an over-the-counter add-on where now they've made it a draw it's probably going to be a pretty hard bear tag to get. And to be honest, it's probably not worth the money because there's never been that many bears up there.
Gotcha.
But so that, like, it's one of those things where like that area now, like from a predator standpoint is always had some mountain lions, not like a ton, but a few. Wolves are going to be the primary predator, and bears are probably going to be like the last big predator on the list. But to go back to elk, basically it's always been, like I said, over the counter has been a huge deal there for rifle. Now, if you buy an over the counter tag there, it's only good for private land, which there is a ton of, and there are a ton of outfitters up there. And for between $1,800 and $3,000, you can get on a place for a cow tag pretty easily. There's a ton of places that will do trespass fees or really pretty reasonable, in my opinion, access. Some of them include lodging for that $3,000. For a bull, you're probably looking at 3 to 7, depending on the exact place and how many acres and that kind of stuff. But so if you are going to go up there for sure, and you're going to be lazy and not putting for the draw, just expect a $10,000 bill this year. Between getting there, finding an outfitter, especially if you're lazy and not putting until over the counter, you're probably not like doing any prep work on your outfitter. You're probably getting either bottom tier or somebody who randomly has spots because they didn't have guys like decide they want to do the kind of more sketchy, harder to get way. So that's kind of where that's at. Is there's a lot less opportunity there than there ever has been, which to be fair is a good thing because the herd number is always, the elk herd up there has usually been like the biggest or second biggest in Colorado for 50 years. It dropped into like the much lower category. I want to say it's like 5th or 6th or 7th now, which is an insane difference from being like, usually it was like 120, 110,000 animals. Some estimates I've seen have been as low as like 65, most around 70, but we're talking 40 to 60,000 animals different in a 2-year period.
Wow.
Like, that's insanity. And so I really applaud Colorado for being like, hey, we're going to take the money hit and deal with the massive reduction in tags that this is going to allow. Because the other thing up there is there's also a ton of ranching for wildlife opportunities, which is a resident thing, where you put in and get private access to a ranch, and then that rancher gets however many cow tags they give away, they get that many bull tags, and then however many either sex licenses they get many cow tags to sell to people as landowner vouchers, which you learned something about last year with mice with our hunt. So they're big money for them, and they basically said, hey, like 95% of those are going away too, or not. It was like 85-90% of those went away.
Wow.
And so like not only did they like piss off all the people who are non-residents or people who've always hunted there, they're also pissing off all the landowners who have made a ton of money historically off of this, and probably help fed their families or keep their cattle alive, or whatever that's money's been used for. They're going to take a big hit too. So it's definitely not their fault, but they're going to probably have the biggest like downside to this whole thing.
Yeah.
It's going to be.
Yeah, and that's that there's two sides to it for sure, but misconception looking in is that hunters just want to go out there and kill things while reducing, like, this is conservation, like this, reducing these tags and everything is being stewards and taking care of, these things for years to come, ensuring that we have hunting opportunities in the future. It may not be the same, but I'm with you there from the standpoint of, you can't, if you have stuff out of your control that affects your populations and everything, you got to adjust for it. And that could impact hunters as far as opportunities. It can impact the state or landowners financially, but you have to have game for future seasons, and this is why. So
yeah, and saying last year they made a change like about the time the draw happened or right before the draw deadline to shorten the 2 rifle seasons up there. I want to say they took 3 or 4 days off. Is it 2 or 4 days? I can't remember, to be honest, but they took days off of 2nd and 3rd rifle up there because of this.
Oh,
and
wow.
That was their change last year. It was kind of last minute. Like they literally did it like March 25th or something like that. So it was like right before a lot of guys had already put in. And I think they gave like a 1 day, if you had already put in, to be able to change yours like 1 day later, like after it closed, you could go in and change it if you put in for one of those tags, based solely on that. And you had to like write up a reason why you wanted to do it based on that. But yeah, they gave the option of like changing because it was such a big deal last year. And so like this is, like I said, even way bigger change on top of that, but it's absolutely necessary by everything that's going on.
Yeah, for sure. What else is the need to know as for the 2024 season?
So like I said, that's definitely the big one, is that like, so plan on probably 1,000 hunters per season, like every season being displaced by this to somewhere else. And so if you have like the required points to get a better tag, it may not be enough this year, because there may be somebody who normally over the counters and then builds their points go, hey, I got pushed out of my normal area this year. I've got 8 points. Let's jump in on something that isn't quite what I was saving up for, but I want to go hunting with a better opportunity this year if I'm going to go somewhere new. So I think that's gonna happen some. The other big change is the whole mountain lion thing that's coming up, where we don't know if we're gonna have a mountain lion season after March, so AK next year and beyond. So if that all goes away, which, to be honest, if it makes the ballot, it's gonna happen. It's gonna go away. So
Yeah.
we're kind of in a tough spot where, if that happens, there's going to be a lot more mountain lions. And then we already have extremely high mountain lion populations in Colorado, not like dangerously high, but high enough to be easily harvested correctly and safely and all that kind of stuff without damaging in populations. So I think that's the other thing, is if you are kind of like in this, I'd say like 8 to 15 point range, and you have something you've looked at and scouted and you'd be comfortable dropping your points on that's right in that range, I would do it. If you're in like the low 20s, I'd say you got to hang on to get one of the top tier units, which are higher than that, of course. But if you're like I said, in that 8 to 15 range, I'd be dumping points this year. Beyond that, I'd be saving. And then if you're less than like 5, I'd probably just bank points this year and go hunt somewhere else. If like either another state or do a landowner voucher that you can afford somewhere.
That was going to be my question, was as you just mentioned, your recommendations on what folks should do if they have certain numbers of points for this year, but then also what your opinion is personally, like as you look at the way that things are trending. Do you see, like, if somebody holds off right now, right, decides to hold off this year, do you think that it's going to benefit them at all next year, or are they going to have to wait even longer to truly benefit from holding off?
I think it depends where you're at. Like I said, if you're sub 5, like it's not gonna like maybe you can get a slightly better hunt with like 4 points versus like this year versus not 4, like versus either over the counter or cheap landowner or something like that. Maybe if you're in that like I said 8 to 15, I think you're going to do better this year than waiting, because there's going to be some more opportunities in that range than normal. I think a lot of guys are going to save. I think based on this, I think a lot of guys are just going to build points and go elsewhere this year. I think it's going to be the trend. Like for me personally, like I'm going to be elk building for 20 more years probably. I lucked into a really awesome opportunity to elk hunt where it's still over the counter bulls, and we have you can draw cow tags 99% of the time as a second choice. And usually even buy a second cow tag and either the leftover or the second draw. So like I'm in a spot now where for elk I'll be building until I get to be able to go to unit either 2 or 1 or 201. It's going to be a long time, and hot spotting them isn't a big deal. Everybody knows those are the best 3 units, and if you're gonna say I'm hot spotting, cool. Let's talk in 30 years when it matters for me and you. If you're at 28 points, different conversation. Maybe I affected you by one guy changing his mind to go there, but probably not. As for deer, I mean, for me, it's so hard to want to save deer points beyond what I need to get to the farm. So
Right.
that's like a 3 to 4 year. So for me, that's not really a good conversation to have, because I have a really awesome opportunity that always takes 3 to 4 points for a mule deer tag with a rifle. So it basically just build points to that point and get it as often as possible.
Yeah.
Pronghorn, I'm still saving for unit 3 and 301. That's my goal anyways. I love hunting up there. Like I said, it's always been something I've wanted to do pronghorn wise. When I get closer in points, I may start looking somewhere elsewhere, but if it's still ugly like this then, but I probably have 5 years till it's a realistic conversation. So it's still going to be a while there. The other one I've got going on is mountain goat, which I'm just starting into the process. So I've got years till that'll matter. You got to have 3 before it even matters. And then after you get your first 3, they do a second count. Basically, you have 3 and then X number of points afterwards. It's the same way for moose and bighorn sheep and desert bighorn sheep. So like, basically I'm at the point now where it's like, it's a dream for 20 years from now, 25 years from now. And when I'm like 50, I'll start looking at it more and playing that game and figuring out if it makes sense to spend or save then. But right now It's just spend the $60 every year, get that point in the bank, and count as a donation for the next 20 years to conservation.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm curious, because last year, as I briefly mentioned, you were able to help me put in for, and I got drawn for out there in northeastern Colorado, out toward your farm, archery mule deer tag. And again, even though I'm understanding how this all works a little bit better, still asking all these novice questions. But
Yeah,
what are the chances of that happening this year? Is there a big difference in that realm from this year if I decided to go this year instead of last year? Would I have a better chance, a worse chance?
I think probably about the same, to be
About the
honest.
same.
I mean, like you saw, there's no public land there, and so anybody who's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I'm gonna go hunt that area," it's like, if you don't know a guy, you ain't gonna hunt that area.
Oh,
Or if
yeah.
you are, you're not gonna have any land to hunt. So if you are looking on the east, anywhere east of like Colorado Springs or like slightly east of Denver, if you don't know a guy, you're going to have the like couple pieces of public land per unit, and that's it. No one's going to give you permission without paying them money.
Yeah.
Unless you're local. I mean, that's what happens for me is my grandma can get us all the permission in the world. That's a different conversation than you coming from out of state or coming from Denver or coming from the Springs.
Right.
You are not going to get permission to big game hunt out there without writing a check or knowing someone.
Right.
So maybe there's one or two more applications, maybe be the random one that missed. I looked after we drew last year, after you drew last year, and every non-resident was 0 drew. There were that put in as their first choice. So that was, you were just happened to be that way.
Holy cow.
the guys that listed as the second choice, none of them drew. So if you had done it like, hey, I want to build a point and get this tag, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
So this year, just because of like number increase, there may be like a couple guys that miss. And our deer herd up there, like you saw, is kind of flexing, and CWD is really heavy up there. So they may slightly lower the number just because of CWD. So maybe that would be like if you miss, that might be the reason. It wouldn't necessarily be hunter numbers. It'd be population numbers just because it's up and down. And I know like my deer had to get tested for CWD, and of course it was positive, which that's like 4 deer in a row for me out there.
Wow.
So it's in both the whitetails and the muleys. If your buck's over 4 years old, it's got it. I'm sure yours that you're eating has it. Be real honest with you. It's just normal out there now that pretty much every semi-old deer's got CWD, especially bucks. So that's the one thing that they've done both ways. They've tried to increase tag numbers to get rid of it, and it hasn't really done anything. There's a lot of locals out there calling for a reduction in tags. That way they can hopefully get some more age class back on the animals. We'll see. I don't think you would have missed this year for any other reason besides like maybe just a different management plan.
Yeah. Yeah, the CWD is a weird thing, and I know, man, I can't remember, because it's starting to creep south. It hasn't gotten to a place where it impacts like us directly on Texas dirt where we whitetail hunt and everything down here in Texas, but I can't remember if it was just a conversation all of us were having up there in camp, or if I was recording a podcast with you or somebody else completely different. I don't remember, but it's just it's almost like you're constantly behind with that stuff, because by the time that a conservationist or not, probably not the best term, but somebody who's management minded or a biologist, the right people start looking at this stuff and start getting results and everything on CWD testing in an area, it's already spread far beyond that area. So you can do whatever you want to do, it seems like, to try and impact that specifically in that hunting area, but it's already passed through there and is on the front line somewhere else. So it's almost like you can't catch up to it. At least that's my perspective.
Yeah, it's super quick spreading, and like the big push in a lot of states, Colorado's never had, so it's never been like they've had to make this change, just getting rid of baiting, or like minerals and that kind of stuff. And that's never been something we've been allowed to do, so it's not been like something they've had to push. But there's been supposedly some science proving it. Probably it's happened, but like my area out there, like, it's got over 20% positive. To give you an idea of all the tests they run, it's over 20% of them come back. They don't give you the exact. I don't think they really want to.
Right.
But basically every county around there, almost all the way to Denver, and then south half of the state is all over 20%. So, like, a quarter of the state out there basically is all over 20%, and then every touching unit's like in the second category, or there's a couple in the third, but most of them are in the second highest category. And that's the other part with like 3 and 301 and those kind of areas. They also have really high CWD. They're all 15% plus, and most of them are 20% plus, where this winter kill was so bad too. And they also have it in their elk herd at like over 15%. So it's getting hit in every possible way. The bad weather, CWD, and name it, that thing's just getting beat up there.
Yeah,
so.
for sure. So I wanted to ask you, and we're getting a little controversial here, but not just as somebody who, knows this big game book backwards and front and can read it with your eyes closed, but as a Colorado resident, as a Colorado voter, what's going on with this mountain lion stuff, man?
So, you kind of have to go back to the wolf thing.
Yeah, the wolf thing too.
Really, but it's all involved, so that's why we have to talk about it. So well, you have to go back far on that to bear stuff back in the 90s. But Colorado has had this really bad habit, and that's what I'm going to call it. You can use other words that most people would rather use, but that's what I'm going to use. Of allowing voters to make wildlife decisions. And this goes back, like I said, into the 90s. The first one was like not letting houndsmen hunt bears anymore with dogs. And that was back, like baiting and hounds were outlawed in like, I want to say it was like 92 or something like that. That's when this whole thing started. So basically once that, it set a precedent where, we'll call them like lesser liked practices is the way I would look at it. Obviously, like there's nothing ethically wrong, in my opinion, hunting bears with hounds or with bait. Other people who don't understand it might have an issue. So it's things that are like kind of on the fringe. So that, that got voted on and killed back in like the 90s. There was another thing that happened in the early 2000s that like got rid of something else. And then we got rid of our spring bear season the same way. So it's like slowly nicked away at everything we've been allowed to do. And then a bunch of money came in, a lot of it from the governor's husband, and not directly, but it's his money. It's from a foundation he works for and is like number 2 at, and is a massive donor too. So whatever you want to take from that, came in and did this whole thing where they wanted to reintroduce wolves. And then, of course, got it to the ballot, because that's how you win with this kind of stuff. You put it to a popular vote, and it won. I mean, barely, like 50.4 to 49.6%. I mean, just barely won. And it's in the past. There's nothing we can do now. But if 5,000 people had voted the other way, that's probably the difference at this point. Like, wow. It's not many people, maybe 10,000. Like, it was a very small, less than 1%. And it got recounted once and stayed. So it's whatever. I'm not fighting the vote. It happened. It's done. Nothing we can do now, except for increased funding to CPW to help offset the cost they're going to have from all these wolf issues. And so that whole thing was written. They had to have wolves on the ground by the end of 2023. They met their mandate barely, which is great that they kind of delayed it as long as they possibly could. They took every lawsuit they could possibly take from cattle ranchers and everybody else and tried to make those drag it out so it wouldn't happen. They all lost. They lost, whatever, it all got done. So in November, December, I don't remember when, I'm sure everybody saw the videos on the internet because it blew up. And I know I got 5,000 messages from everybody. Hey, look what happened today. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Shut up. I'm sure. Yeah, I think I sent them to you the same day. They said, hey, look. And it was just like, everybody knew it happened, whatever. It was supposed to happen. And there's nothing we can do about it. So they got 2 packs down now. So anyways, that's that. They have to introduce a few more this year. There's nothing really that can be done from like a legal perspective or a voting perspective, unless we're going to like open a new box and try to vote it away, which at this point it's just not going to happen in Colorado. Like it's a done deal. Wolves are going to be here to stay. Hopefully they're all going to be collared and tracked, and hopefully the Game and Fish is going to pay out animal damage. That's my one concern there, is are they going to pay livestock damages? I know they've claimed so far there's been a few that they have not paid. And if that keeps happening, things are going to get ugly, but we'll see. I don't know if they suppose they can't be proven, but who knows? Anyways, back to mountain lion thing. So the the way it works here is there's a council basically that manages our hunting seasons. And usually it's like partial biologists, and there's a couple state appointees. Well, our last several governors have all been leaning one way. And the one, like I said now, who his spouse is an extreme animal rights activist, they obviously appointed people who have similar beliefs. And so they thought, with all the bad rep nationally and kind of in a, just public space about mountain lion hunting, in like California getting rid of theirs and a few other states, it kind of being, issued, and lots of people being pissed off and rallying to get rid of it. Basically, this season here runs through the end of March. The commissioners that they all appointed in like that panel decided we're not going to, normally there's like a small April season that's part of like the next year, if you will, is the way it runs. They basically said, well, it's going to end at the end of March. We're not going to have that April extension. And then there's a bunch of stuff where they're trying to get a thing to go to the ballot. Kind of two things are kind of added. It just kind of depends on what ends up getting passed. I expect one of the two will end up on the ballot, if not both. The lesser of the two, like from a hunting's perspective, is they want to ban electronic collars and the use of dogs to hunt mountain lions. So like e-collars and electronic calls, and then also hunting with hounds. Do I think that if that goes onto the ballot, that's absolutely going to pass? So that, I mean, we might as well expect that to be a done deal at the end of the year, to be honest with you. Just the culture of Colorado, I don't see that getting defeated unless like Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation or something like that drops a couple $1 million in ads and says, we're going to go all in here and make this the battleground that wins it. That is the one. None of them did it for wolves, so I don't expect any of them to do it for this. None of them even made videos or did anything about it. None of them did anything, so I expect nothing to happen again. Guys that you donate to those places, find somebody that cares. There are a couple organizations out fighting against this. I forget the one, but it's on Instagram all the time. It's like CWRN or something like that. We'll find it and put a link in or something to them somewhere. But they seem to be one of the few that's actually doing like educational stuff on this, not necessarily like we don't want this, but like truly like educational, but hunting leaning educational.
Yeah, more than just
stuff.
a description on a ballot, like should people be allowed to hunt mountain lions with hounds, or with electronic
and explaining like how it's a normal practice and like stuff like that. Like it's so like that would be a place, I forget what it stands for, but we'll figure it out and get it posted. But that would be one, like if you are going to donate money to do it. So like I said, none of the big dogs did much of anything, if anything, for wolves. So I don't expect the same again. The other one is there's they want to put a ban on all mountain lion, bobcat, and lynx hunting. Of course, lynx are already federally protected on the Endangered Species Act. They were introduced into Colorado in like the 90s in the San Juan Valley, which is southwest Colorado. Just a couple, like less than 50 of them were introduced. I want to say there's about 500 now, and some of them have traveled some way. I know there was a video that was really popular that CPW put up actually, I want to say in November or December, sometime in that range, of a lynx kind of near Silverthorne, which is right off I-70. So it's a substantial difference. Like we're talking like probably 200 or 300, like as the crow fly miles from where they were introduced, to where one really cool video, honestly, there's a really cool video of one walking by. And so like, whatever, they're already federally protected. There's no reason to add a state protection. They're going to be on the endangered species list probably until the end of time. The only place you can like legally hunt them in the world is Canada and parts of Alaska. So like just expect that. And then Africa, there's a different species of lynx you can hunt over there, but lynx are not going to be legal to hunt in Colorado probably ever. Anyone who thinks this is about protecting those is crazy. They're going to be on the endangered species list until 200 years from now, if everything goes perfect. Maybe at that point they'll come off.
Right.
So like that's I think the one of the things that they threw on there to try to like make people think we really need to vote for this, but there's going to be no change in their protections in the foreseeable future unless their population explodes in the next few years, which I just don't see happening.
Yeah.
knowing how they operate. They have really low fecundity. They have like 1, maybe 2 babies a year. They skip years every other year. Like they're just not a species that's going to reproduce at a rate to warrant getting off. They're beautiful. I mean, they're super cool. It'd be something that if like I got an opportunity in Alaska or Canada, I probably would. But it's not like it's not something that's going to happen here in a realistic time frame. As for bobcats are in a really good population standpoint here. There's no need to protect them. You already have to have another additional license to hunt them here. Beyond just a small game, you have to have a fur bearer license as well. Or if you have fur bearer, you can hunt them with that if you don't have a small game. So it's one of those things where like people that don't know don't understand kind of thing. I don't think there's any need to protect them personally. There's good populations where they are. There's not very many anywhere I've been. I've got a couple trail cam pictures of them at the farm, but that's few and far between.
Yeah.
And then of course the mountain lions. Colorado has some of the best mountain lion populations in the lower 48. I think the only place that has like higher populations like per like where they can live right now is California. But California's been not allowed to hunt them for many, many years. I think it's like over 6 now. And then they're paying professional hunters to kill the mountain lions because they're killing too many dogs. So it's like, we're not quite to that point, but we could be there in 3 years if this goes away.
Yeah.
And not that like hunters are really making the difference, but what we're doing is we're keeping them in the right places for the most part. They're still killing a lot of dogs in small towns in the mountains, but they're not yet coming down into Boulder and Fort Collins and like the other places that are probably the people who are going to vote yes on this. And then they're going to see like their open space by their house is going to be like 15 dogs a week get murdered by mountain lions in 5 years if this goes through. I don't think they're thinking about that. I don't think that's anything they'd ever believe would happen, no matter all the proof in the world to show that it's probably likely. But I mean, that's where we're eventually headed when this passes. And then it'll be, who knows what happens from there. Like I said, I fully expect if one of them hits the ballot for it to pass. I just don't think there's enough people that are going to be motivated against it to make a big enough noise to get the middle ground to jump that way. Because I thought wolves wasn't going to pass, and then when I saw it did. Like mountain lions are even more, I think, iconic to a lot of people here. I know from people at work that don't hunt and know I hunt. I mentioned it one day and I got looks like, oh, you can shoot a mountain lion. I'm like, yes, after you do a test and do all this other stuff. Because like on a mountain lion here, you have to you get a book, like the book you got, but it's half as thick. You have to read the whole book and you have to pass a test at like 90% plus score on it.
Oh, wow.
Maybe even higher than that, I forget. And then you're allowed to purchase a tag at that point after you've passed everything.
Huh.
It's not just like, where we go deer hunting and stuff, where I'm just like, hey, Sam, calling over. If you're like, hey, I want to go mountain lion hunting, be like, cool, here's the book, read.
Study.
Study, because if you fail, like, they're not going to give it to you, like, and they're not going to let you retest.
Yeah.
I think you can retest once in a year, but it's like, it's one of those things and it's not just like basic stuff that you all know. It's like identifying a tom versus to be honest, I don't even know what a female cat's called, so don't.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's like literally involved enough where you should be able to know, like looking at a cat, what it is and stuff like that. So, it's a big deal to be able to mountain lion hunt here. It's not just like get a deer tag where you just pay the money and go.
Yeah. So with the wolf thing that's already happened, the mountain lion thing that could happen, and then a larger outlook on years to come, whether it's because of predators like this that are now allowed to stay, more of them at least, and or weather, losing populations, all this other kind of stuff that we've already discussed. Less tags, less money for CPW, and then obviously the tags that are there, the prices will increase some, but that's not going to recoup the entirety of the money that they could lose if depending on how heavy it trends. But then and we might be getting off in the weeds too far on this, but then how does like federal funding, like with Pittman Robertson and other stuff like that, how do you see that changing? Is that gonna be their saving grace, or how is that gonna work, you think?
Well, Pittman Robertson, of course, or Pittman, which is Pittman Robertson, which is the hunting one, and then Dingle Johnson's the fishing one.
Yeah.
So, from a fishing perspective, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of change in our fishing licensing, like how many are going to get bought. Luckily, we have really good fly fishing in the summer, so lots of people buy those licenses.
Yeah.
And as you probably saw, when you buy a big game tag here, it includes a fishing license. So they get Dingle Johnson money every time you buy a big game tag. Super smart move by CPW. I wish they did if it was cheaper to do like the combo for me, I'd probably buy it just to get us the extra money, but it's $25 more and I'm not going to ever go fishing in my whole life. So it's hard to justify the $25, but it's free bonus money. So that's a super smart move for them to add that on, in my opinion, to all the big game tags.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I think they did really well. I forgot when they did that, but it's been longer than I've been buying my own tags. So it's probably been 15 years anyways. But so that was a good move for non-resident tags. So that helps there. As for like the Pittman Robertson, obviously if you get less in license fees, you get less in Pittman Robertson. So I think that's going to be one big thing. The way the tag increases work here, like cost wise, is they go up by the cost of living index change locally, which Colorado's is exploding right now, and they had some big jumps this year. We broke 800 in an elk tag. The biggest one though was the non-resident bear tag.
I noticed that.
Last year I talked to you and everybody else, and I made a big deal about how it was about $100. I forget the exact number, and I was like, you need to go this year because they lowered it intentionally. And then this year they jumped it back up to 251, which is about on par where it should have been if they didn't lower it on like the last 2 years. I think they had 2 years of like lowering it to try to get people to hunt more bears. And then they blew it way back up this year, and it's going to go up based on that number going forward. So hopefully they'll still sell about the same number of bear tags. I don't expect that they will. I think it's going to drop off pretty hard after that. It's a lot easier to justify $100 extra. It's a lot harder to be like 250.
Yeah.
Like when you come up and you're like, oh, I can add on a bear tag for $100 while I'm elk hunting. Like that's easy. Like maybe even like, hey, 250, and then next year it'll be 270 or something like that. It's just gonna get harder and harder to justify every year. So I think that's going to be the other big losses. I get why they brought it up. I think they should have left it as low as they possibly could, because one, I think we need less predators, and that's the only one they're actually going to be able to really manage besides like coyotes going forward. I feel like, because like I said, I expect this mountain lion 1-2 pass if it gets on the ballot. If it doesn't happen this year, it's going to happen in the next 4 years. Every 4 years, Colorado does their big like adjustments to stuff. This happened to be the 4-year mark where it happened. I know I was telling you I was super worried about the changes coming. They weren't nearly as bad as I thought they were going to be. But I thought we were going to have some more bad things happen from a hunting perspective, like in terms of a lot less opportunity. It didn't happen, so that's great. I expected our tree elk to pretty much go away, which didn't happen. It was reduced, but there's still quite a few opportunities there. So that's like the good news. The bad news of that though is because we're hunting sort of semi-depleted populations that are going to be harder and harder hit every year going forward. Even if the weather's good, like I would expect tag numbers are probably not going to grow. Like I said, I expect point creep to become like 5 years from now, be like you need 7 points instead of 5 points kind of thing. And I think the high ends are going to be like max point number is going to be the new guaranteed minimum for like the best of the best units. Sometimes you can draw them with one less than the max. I don't think that's going to be a thing. Anything more, I think it's going to be maxed and then max, and then every year it's just going to be the new max number to draw. So, like me trying to build up for elk, like I know like I'm probably looking at 30 years to get the right spot where I want to go as a resident with multiple points already.
Wow.
to get into the premier end. but like I said, I have a really awesome opportunity that's yearly where I don't expect, like, the herd there is extremely healthy. It's pretty isolated from where they've dropped the wolves so far. It's far enough from the border where the Wyoming crossovers aren't getting there yet. There's a lot of reasons, like where the area I had this really awesome opportunity is a really good spot long term. And that's why I'm not really getting it to where it is.
Yeah.
But it, it's also like I'm just blessed because of that. Whereas otherwise, I would be scrambling for sure going forward with what's my elk plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, what else do our podcast listeners need to know if there's anything left on the table?
I know it's been like super negative, but still, this is like the difference between putting in. Here's like what I want to say. A guy posted on, somebody's reposted the article, one of our staff guys, and then I sent that guy a message like, "Hey, what's your question?" Because he said something about, "Hey, I need to figure out how to go to Colorado," and he's like, is it really worth to buy points like for like long term? And I was like, well, here's the difference. Like, if you, especially like an archery perspective, because you want to do archery elk, get like 5 to 7 points, you're in. It'd be $120 this year, so we'll say you're in like $900 after 7 years, give or take. Maybe $1,000. Versus like to get the same quality of hunt, you're either hiring an outfitter for probably $5,000 to $7,000, or spending 70% of that amount of money for a landowner tag to just get the access to a similar area, like from a like. So that's what you're getting by paying and playing the long game of getting points. And like if it's only $10 more to get another species. So like let's say you're like, hey, this is where I want to go for elk. It takes 5 points. You do that for 5 years. The whole time you've paid your $10 for deer. Well, then like year 6 or year 7, you've got your deer tag, and you just paid like an extra 50 or 60 or $70 for it. Like it's literally nothing to make the additional tag. And then if you've done 7 years to get your deer, you did your pronghorn your whole time. Year 9, year 10, you got a decent pronghorn tag. You paid an extra $100 for your 10 years to get that pronghorn tag. So the big thing is if you're going to make the jump to start, do at least those 3 every year. Bear points, I am not a fan of getting bear points. There's so many good opportunities. Like if you are willing to hike your butt off and hunt for the month of September, there's so many good bear opportunities that like bear points to me just don't make money sense. Unless you're like, that's your everything is bear hunting, then sure. But for like me, even at $10 a year, it doesn't make sense for me to buy bear tags. If I really want to, I'll just take a month off and go do that as my primary.
Right.
So that's where, and spring bear elsewhere is honestly a better opportunity than Colorado fall bear in a lot of places. I know it's crappy of me to say I love people hunting here. I love license money coming into Colorado, but if I were going to go on a bear hunt, it probably would not be fall here. It'd be spring somewhere else. I don't know where yet, but that's probably, to be honest.
Yeah.
Alaska would definitely be my first pick. Like for a spring black bear hunt there, like on the water in May, that'd be awesome. But future dreams, eh?
For sure.
But yeah, I think the big thing is if you start, do those 3, and then like in 10 years you'll have 3 awesome Western hunts, like 5 year, 7 year, 9, 10 year. Versus if you, it's not that, like at that point, it's not that much money extra for the other ones. So that's my first thing. The second thing is like, if you are going to jump into one of the big ones, like moose, mountain goat, bighorn sheep, really look at like what state do you want to go to? I know all the high end places tell you put in for every single state, put all your eggs all over the place to go as often as possible. Most guys in our situation are going to get one of those, maybe 2 of those tags in their lifetime if they put in everywhere. Colorado's is fairly reasonable. If you're already putting in, it's an extra $10 at the time of your application, and then it's $50 if you're a resident, $100 if you're not. In late May, early June, to get your point, and you have to pay it or you don't get your point, and then it's worthless to put it in the first place. So like if you're gonna jump that bandwagon, just realize you're investing for long term. The mountain goat Cardo tag this year sold for, I think it's for 57,000 for the governor's tag.
Wow.
Last year was like the lowest ever, and it was like 37,000. So unless that's like sitting in your pocket and you're like, hey, I can go do this every year, pick a state or two and do that. Like I said, everyone will tell you to go to all of them. Realistically, let's say you get 30 years from now and you start drawing a bunch of $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 tags, because that's what they're going to be in 30 years. Even if you've saved really well, you're not going to be able to afford like 3 hunts or 2 hunts a year at tags with that, let alone realistically, if you get that, let's be real, you're going to get an outfitter. If you're dropping $3,000 on a tag, you're finding an outfitter.
Oh yeah.
Even if it's like, I mean, maybe not, or maybe a guy or whatever, but when I get my mountain goat hunt eventually, I'm planning on it being a $10,000 to $15,000 hunt. Whereas like going somewhere else for mountain goat is anywhere from like 47 to 70. So it's cheaper, but it's also like I'm realistic about like this tag is not the only cost here. Like this is the icing. This is the top of the food chain. It's getting the tag, and then having it is like, paying for the tag itself is like the cheap part of it.
Yeah.
Some guys, there may be guys out there who hunt in certain areas all the time where those animals are present, and maybe they know enough to be able to get away with that. Like if you hunt, the units for those are different. So that's the other thing, is if you are looking at those, like the normal units that Cardo uses for elk and everything else are not the same. So make sure you get the mountain goat and bighorn sheep book, because the units are very, very different and they're managed very, very differently. So like if that's your goal, there's lots of good opportunity there, but it's also like you can spend. I know guys that spend like $5,000 a year in applications and in points.
Yeah.
To get every Western state. So like I got every possible opportunity, and I'm like, cool. In 20, 25, 30 years, when you start drawing one of these every couple of years, like every year, are you going to be able to afford to go every time you draw one of these?
Yeah.
Which maybe that's a great problem to have in 30 years from now. But like, oh, I can't go on this tag that I finally drew, and now I got to figure out like, now I got to sell something to go on this hunt. But it's also like, at that point, you're realistically like, even, if you start at 20, you planned ahead, you start when you turn 20, you're 50, you're getting older, you're getting to the point where things are getting harder. And then you start drawing the later ones. Like when I draw, I'll be late 50s, early 60s. Like I'm going to be stretching it to go mountain goat hunting at that point. And, if I were to have put in for something else at the same other time and get it 5 years later than that, like it's probably not going to be a realistic hunt at that point.
Right. Yeah. You gotta play the long game a little bit with some of it, and at least outsiders coming in or first timers might not always realize that. So it's always an interesting piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Well, man, I appreciate your time. Unless you got anything else for us.
That's pretty much it. In the one thing that I mentioned in the article goes into like that whole thing with those ones a lot. It gets into like, what's it cost to do this somewhere else? So like for moose especially, it's not like that much more money to go to like Newfoundland or other parts of Alaska and hunt moose versus like putting in for 20 years and buying or getting a moose tag. Like Newfoundland, you can usually go for about 7,000. Whereas like, you're, like I said, the tag right now is like 28. It's going to be over 3 by the time you draw. You've put in $100 a year for 20 years. That's another $2,000. You're at $5,000 right there. So at some of those, especially if you're semi older, like in your 40s, it might make sense to just pull the trigger, drop some change at a sportsman show and go on one of those hunts versus like playing the long game.
Yeah. No, different for everybody. Find what works best for you within the system, I guess. But,
absolutely.
Well, for our listeners, appreciate you guys tuning in. Hope that this was beneficial and educational for y'all. If you are either curious about what Colorado's got going on right now, about any changes that may have happened, or certainly if you're interested in applying, whether it's for an actual tag or just putting in for points this year, hope you guys got something out of this. If you have any questions, anything that was left unanswered after this podcast, or anything that you can't find in the article on fallobsession.com, feel free to reach out to us through the website. We can get you in contact with Tim if our initial staff isn't able to answer the question right out of the gate, but we can put you in touch with Tim if you have additional questions, and he can help get you squared away. So please reach out if you have any questions. But thank you all for listening to another podcast. Be sure you follow and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. We drop not monthly. Golly, that'd be rough. Weekly new episodes. I'd have some sponsors to answer to if we did that. But appreciate you guys tuning in. Tim, thank you again, man. Always appreciate you putting in the work this time every year and getting these resources out to folks. It's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am more than willing to help anybody. So if you do reach out, we will help you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just don't do it. One thing I want to add, because Nick Powell always screws this
up. Calling him out.
Yes, I'm calling you out, Nick, because this is your fault. Deadline, absolute hard deadline, you will be late and they will not care, is April 2nd at 8 p.m. If you send us a message at like 7 p.m. on April 2nd, I'm not going to help you. I've had that happen multiple years with Nick Powell. Yes, you heard your name. So if you send me a message at 7 o'clock that night, I will try to help you, but expect that something's going to come up and I won't. I've got little kids at home. That's bedtime. That's not me helping you on the phone time. So that's where I'm at. If you need help, please reach out before April 1st. That way we have some time to actually get you a plan, get you figured out. But yeah, make sure you absolutely, again, that deadline is April 2nd, 8 p.m. Do not miss it, because you'll be stuck another year. And like I said, like that's 1 year longer until things happen. So why push that hunt off just because you were lazy for 5 minutes? Like,
yeah.
The first time you put in, sorry, I'm rambling here.
No, you're good, man.
I had a thought. The first time you put in, like creating your account and everything, it's going to take about 30 minutes. Would you say that's about what it took you last year, Sam?
Yeah, 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah, I can say, well, I was walking you through. Let's figure out that made it faster.
Man, it was like, I'm not lying when this guy knows the book backwards and front. I called him. He probably wasn't even sitting in front of a computer. He was just, put this number in, this, on this page, you're going to see this, and wada boom, wada bing, we were done. So,
yeah, but yeah, for real, it's like 30 minutes. And then that's for about 2 or 3 animals. If you get into the weeds, it may take you longer if you're doing 5 or 6. I usually do my applications in about 10 minutes now that I've got it figured out. I always just double check everything 3 times, and I'm a little bit crazy like that. But yeah, so like I said, it takes a little bit of time, and the server slows down around August 1st, March 31st, because everybody and their brother's doing it, because, we're all lazy hunters and we all think last minute. So
yeah,
that's my one thing that I always push, because one staff member is notorious for it, and I'm sure there'll be others this year.
You know who you are.
Yeah. It's okay, Nick. We still love you.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys again for listening to another podcast. We're back again next week, and I will catch you guys then.